You've probably found that cast iron pan in the back of a cabinet, the one that used to belong to your mom, or the one you grabbed for $2 at an estate sale, and felt your stomach drop at the orange-brown spot spreading across it. Not dirt, not something a sponge fixes, rust. And your first thought was probably that it's ruined, that whatever made it good is already gone. Here's what nobody in the cleaning aisle tells you. The fix was never a special rust remover. It's already sitting in your spice rack, and one of the places it works has nothing to do with metal at all. Stick around for that one. Not because you did something wrong to it. Rust isn't caused by neglect the way you probably think it is. It's caused by moisture-meeting iron, full stop, and it happens to careful people just as often as careless ones. Cream of tartar, potassium bitartrate, is a byproduct of winemaking that ended up in your spice rack because it's also a baking ingredient, the thing that keeps egg whites stiff and stops sugar from crystallizing. But it's also a mild acid, and mild acids do something rust removers built around sandpaper and wire brushes simply can't. They bind directly to the rust itself, the same way a squeeze of lemon juice cuts through the metallic smell on your hands after handling a copper pot. Here's the difference that actually matters. A wire brush or steel wool physically grinds rust off a surface, taking a thin layer of the metal underneath along with it, which is why aggressive scrubbing leaves scratches, thins out cast iron seasoning, and dulls chrome a little more every time you do it. Cream of tartar works chemically instead. It reaches into the rust, iron oxide, and pulls the iron back out of it, lifting the stain away while leaving the solid metal underneath completely untouched. That's the whole difference between removing rust and removing metal. One method fixes the actual problem, the other just makes it look fixed for a little while, until the surface is thinner and even more likely to rust again next season. It's also why the bright orange rust remover sprays at the hardware store work so well on a driveway stain, but feel too aggressive to trust on a pan you actually cook with. Because they usually are, most of them lean on stronger acids that don't know the difference between rust and the metal it's sitting on. One weak acid, every rusted surface in your house. And it's been sitting 3 feet from your stove the entire time. So back to that pan. You've probably already tried the thing everyone recommends first, scrubbing it with steel wool until your arm burns, then re-seasoning it and hoping the rust doesn't come back. It usually does, because scrubbing never actually removed the rust, it just knocked the surface layer off and left the rest to keep spreading quietly underneath. Make a paste with 2 tablespoons of cream of tartar and just enough hydrogen peroxide to bind it. Then coat the rusted areas and let it sit for an hour. Skip the dish soap during this step. It fights the acid instead of helping it, and it strips whatever seasoning is still holding on. The acid goes to work pulling the iron out of the rust while you do something else entirely. No scrubbing required yet. After an hour, a soft cloth is usually enough to wipe the rust away completely, right down to bare, clean iron underneath. Rinse it, dry it immediately and completely. Cast iron starts rusting again within hours if it air dries wet, which is probably how it got here in the first place. Then re-season it with a thin layer of oil baked on at 450 degrees for an hour. What you get back isn't a pan that looks okay, it's the pan from before the rust ever started, seasoning and all, and that same trick works on something you'd never think to try it on. Rust stains on white clothing, the kind that show up after a metal button, a zipper, or a wire hanger sits against wet fabric too long, ruin more shirts than people realize, because every laundry stain remover on the shelf is built to break down organic stains like food and sweat. Rust isn't organic, it's a mineral, which is exactly why those stain removers just sit there, doing nothing while the mark stares back at you after an entire wash cycle, dryer heat and all. Make a thinner paste of cream of tartar with a few drops of lemon juice. Work it into the stained fabric and let it sit for 30 minutes in direct sunlight if you can get it there. The same iron binding reaction that pulled rust off your pan pulls it out of the fabric fibers instead. Rinse in cool water, never hot, which can set what's left of the stain permanently into the fibers. Then wash as normal. Test it on a hidden seam first if the fabric is colored. But on whites, a stain that survived detergent, bleach, and a full dryer cycle disappears in one treatment. Stay with me because the reveal that actually surprised people who've tested this is what it does to chrome. You've probably scrubbed a rusted faucet or bike handlebar with a chrome cleaner spray, watched it foam up dramatically, then wiped it off to find the same rust spot still sitting there underneath the shine. Most chrome cleaners are built to polish and add shine, not to break an existing rust bond. So on chrome that's already rusted, they're treating the wrong problem entirely. Sprinkle cream of tartar directly onto a damp cloth, rub it into the rust spot in small circles, and watch spots that have been there for months lift away in under 2 minutes. Chrome is thin enough that the same chelation reaction works almost instantly compared to the full hour cast iron needs. Rinse and buff dry with a separate cloth immediately, since chrome left wet is exactly how the rust got there in the first place. It works the same way on bathroom fixtures, bike chains, and the chrome trim on old kitchen appliances nobody thinks to save anymore. Speaking of things people assume can't rust, your stainless steel sink. Most people assume stainless steel can't rust. It's right there in the name. But stainless only means resistant, not immune, and those orange spots that show up under a rusting can of tomatoes or a steel wool pad left sitting in the basin are proof it isn't invincible. What's actually rusting there is a microscopically thin surface layer, not the steel itself, which is exactly why this one is almost embarrassingly easy to fix. Sprinkle cream of tartar directly onto the wet spot, add a few drops of water to work it into a light paste, and rub in the direction of the steel's grain. You can usually feel or see faint lines running one way across the surface. Rinse and buff dry within a minute or two. Because the rust here is only ever surface deep, most spots lift completely on the first try. No hour of waiting required like the pan needed. The habit that stops this one from ever coming back: never leave a wet steel wool pad or a rusting can sitting directly on the sink. A small dish or rack underneath solves the entire problem before it starts. Now here's what nobody tells you about the tools sitting in your garage right now. Most people assume a rusted garden trowel, a padlock, or a wrench that's been sitting in a damp shed is basically disposable at that point. Not worth the effort to save over a $2 replacement. But the same paste that saved a cast iron pan works exactly the same way on tool steel. Coat the rusted metal, let it sit for an hour, just like the pan, then scrub gently with an old toothbrush to get into any grooves, hinges, or padlock keyholes the rust likes to hide in. For anything too large to coat and paste, a rusted patio chair or a wheelbarrow say, mix a stronger solution of cream of tartar in warm water and wipe it on with a rag instead, reapplying every 20 minutes until the rust stops transferring to the cloth. Dry the tool completely and wipe it down with a thin layer of oil before it goes back in the shed, which is the one step most people skip right after finally getting a tool clean, and the exact reason the rust always seems to come back within a month. A spray like WD-40 might push moisture off the surface temporarily, but it was never built to stop rust from reforming the way a proper oil coating does. Add it up: cast iron, white clothing, chrome, stainless steel, tools. 5 completely different rust problems, 1 packet of cream of tartar that costs about the same as a candy bar and lasts through dozens of treatments, since you're only ever using a tablespoon or 2 at a time. Keep a small jar of it near your cleaning supplies, not just in the baking cabinet, so you're not digging through the spice rack mid-treatment with rust-stained hands. And the single habit that keeps you from needing it again on anything: dry metal completely before you put it away, every time. Rust doesn't happen because metal is old. It happens because moisture sat on it for longer than it should have, and that part is always within your control. Here's the part worth remembering. That pan in the back of your cabinet was never actually ruined. Rust looks permanent because it looks like damage, and damage feels like something you can't undo. But rust is just a chemical reaction sitting on top of metal that's still completely fine underneath it. And the fix was never about replacing what you thought you'd lost. It was about knowing which $3 ingredient could reach into that reaction and reverse it. The pan gets to stay the pan, the shirt gets to stay the shirt. The tools that have been sitting in that shed longer than you can remember get to stay exactly what they always were. Nothing here needed to be thrown away, replaced, or apologized for. It just needed the right acid, sitting quietly in your spice rack the whole time, waiting to be trusted with something more than banana bread. One spice rack staple, 4 rust problems solved. Subscribe if this saves something you thought was already gone.